Hello, hello, everyone. GMBM. Welcome to Let's Ride on the BMX DeFi account. How's everyone doing today? We got Cassandra here. We got Deez here. How's everybody doing on this Tuesday?
Doing pretty great. How are you?
I'm doing great. GMBM catch up. Just getting back from New York from NFT NYC. Very first stream since getting home. So very excited. Cassandra, I just have to say before we start, I absolutely love your background. It's super cool. And yeah, set the colors today for Quilibrium. And very excited to dive into the project and learn more about what you guys do. Yeah. So before we dive into the agenda, I'll just pass it off to Deez to do a quick disclaimer and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, before we get started, the standard, nothing we talk about today is financial advice. It's all purely for educational purposes, and excited to dive in on the heels of a freshly launched carousel. So if you haven't checked it out, check out carousel.trade. BMX is gearing up for more non-fungible assets coming on chain. Well,
yeah,
pass it back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Deez. BMX is absolutely heating up. By the way, I see a comment from Jimmy there, GMBM Jimmy, who actually brought me up on stage to speak at NFT NYC, you guys. Gave up a portion of his talk to have me come up to talk about this new short film I'm working on. So big shout out to Jimmy. Absolutely love Jimmy. And we're going to have him on the stream one of these weeks as well. Yeah, so just to dive in deeper here, so why don't we start with a brief introduction, Cassandra, just, talking a bit about who you are, what your background is, and what your role is at Quilibrium.
Sure. So my name is Cassandra Heart. I'm the founder of Quilibrium. I have been in the space basically since the beginning, quite literally. Like I was on the Metzdowd mailing list on October 31st, 2008, when Satoshi posted.
Wow.
So I've been here a very, very long time. I've been a huge advocate for the whole cypherpunk movement, and so the idea of decentralized finance, great, but just generally self-sovereignty and using crypto to enforce that's basically been my bread and butter.
You're speaking my language. Definitely has been one of the core reasons. I'm sure you read The Sovereign Individual and have gotten really into the philosophy behind that. That's one of the core reasons that I got involved in the space. So yeah, definitely a lot of alignment. You're speaking my language over there. So yeah, I am curious, if you can give a brief overview of what Quilibrium is, what problems that you aim to solve through this project, and who is it for?
Sure. So to kind of set the history back to the beginning of this, because this project's been in motion in part for 8 years now. So originally, I was doing an educational series on Twitch, teaching people how to code, trying to build things at scale that staff engineers do at Facebook, Amazon, that. And we were basically doing things through example. And one of the examples was building a clone of Discord. How do you break down Discord into its fundamental components? How do you handle millions of users at scale, that kind of thing? And of course, as this continued to grow as a project, it became more and more an actual thing. So I realized this is something that people could potentially want, but it needs to be differentiated from Discord itself. And me being a huge fan of crypto, I'm just hey, how about we actually bring in some things that Discord can't or won't do and turn it into something unique. And so I went down the deep rabbit hole of trying to decentralize it and make it end-to-end encrypted. And if you ever have used something like Signal, for example, Signal has a cap on how many users you can have in a group. It's 1,000. And the reason is because the way they do encryption requires that each message you send is encrypted to each individual user in the group. So if you send a message to a group of 1,000 users, it's encrypting it 999 times and sending 999 messages. That's very inefficient. And the reason they do that is because the way that type of encryption works is you can only really get the security guarantees if you're basically going pairwise across each peer. And what that comes down to is there's really hard problems in the space of cryptography that make it very difficult to come up with a group encryption scheme that doesn't default to that in some way. And so I previously worked at Coinbase before I went full-time on Quilibrium. I was a senior staff engineer there, and I worked on the MPC related projects there, in particular, the MPC wallet that was embedded into the Coinbase retail app. So that wallet feature that was there, that was partially my handiwork. And
That's very cool.
one of the things about MPC is that it basically lets you do, I mean, the definition of it, or the acronym stands for multi-party computation. And basically what that lets you do is have multiple computers work together to compute a single thing without revealing their own inputs. And so you can do things like, mutually have multiple parties sign something together with a private key that never actually exists in one place. Or in the case of what I was building, allow you to do a group encryption scheme that doesn't require having to send a message 999 times. And that's really important because that lets you scale out to, millions of people in a single group chat. And so as I was building this out, I realized each of the problems that Discord has, like how do you host images? How do you have a large backing database to scale up to potentially 1 million users in a single group? Like, for example, the Midjourney server. How do you solve those problems? And as I was breaking them down and solving them one at a time, I started to realize I'm basically rebuilding Amazon Web Services, but in a decentralized format. And so it's part of that kind of idea maze that a lot of founders go through. But ultimately, the real pivot for me was realizing, actually, I could just do this. And this is something that people need more than another Discord clone. That's great if we have one, but what people actually want is, sovereign infrastructure that you can use for whatever your projects are without having to worry about being at the whims of either a government or, Amazon themselves, because they've deplatformed companies before. And so that's ultimately how Quilibrium came to be.
Wow. Well, yeah, I got a comment here from Ketchup. Sounds like Quilibrium is making encryption scalable and more resource efficient. Totally. And I also like, Cassandra, that you had that awareness of okay, what do people actually need right now? Having, there are a lot of things that are nice to have in this space, but it sounds like you've really prioritized something that people really need. Paul CBD is saying LFG. And yeah, by the way, if anybody has comments throughout the stream, just want to say, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you want to ask Cassandra anything, feel free to drop it in the comments. We do pay attention to those. So feel free to drop your questions. And yeah, also very impressive that you have a Coinbase background. Let's see. Fotis is saying, after reading the paper as well, the document, it seems like more circulated around that. And I am curious, what that timeline has been for you, going from Coinbase to starting Quilibrium. How long has that journey been for you?
So I was at Coinbase for about 2 years, and then about 2.5 years ago is when I stepped away. Long story short, it's a bit of I wouldn't call it a controversy, but I had a difference of opinion about what Coinbase was pursuing. Namely, they obviously wanted to go down this path of launching a new chain that ended up being the L2 base that everyone knows now. And there was some prior ideation on what it was all going to be. And I had some very strong opinions. Jesse had some strong opinions, executive team had strong opinions. And ultimately I was like, you know what, I'm going to go build what I wanted to build, because I don't want to build, something that forks optimism like that. That's not something that, that's not where I can best apply my abilities. And so I parted ways and decided to go on this full time. And that's basically the inflection point about 2.5 years ago.
Wow. Well, it looks like you've done a lot of great work since then. And Deez, I'm not sure, before we go into the nitty gritty here, Deez, if you have any questions or anything you want to add here, just before we dive in deeper.
Yeah, just to riff on that, I'm so interested in founder journeys when you leave take the leap out of a larger role and then start your own thing. How was it growing your team at Quilibrium? Did people come to you? Did you put the lighthouse up and they kind of sailed to you, or did you have to reach out to certain individuals you had in mind, or how was that process developing into the team that you have today?
Yeah, so Quilibrium's been kind of a cool thing in the sense that both for business development and recruiting, it's actually been very, very easy, largely because this project nerd snipes people really well. there's just a lot of unique things about it that interested people that, they wanted to build on it or they wanted to help build it. And so like the recruiting pipeline has basically been people who have been open source contributors to the project. So I haven't had to really do any outbound recruiting there. And same thing kind of on the biz dev side. There's a lot of people, for example, like one of our common use cases is people who, this is a fundamental fault across the entire crypto ecosystem right now, is that most people hosting a decentralized app, for example, it's not actually decentralized when you think about it, because while the smart contract may live on Ethereum or Base or Solana or whatever, at the end of the day, the front end is usually hosted on Amazon Web Services or something like that. And so there's not really a good decentralized substrate for hosting applications. You might be able to put like a front end on IPFS, but when you actually have to do any sort of, crunching of data or indexing of data on chain, like it turns into this kind of dilemma. Like you're forced into using a small subset of centralized providers for indexing data, usually a centralized backend to host the actual services that process this data. And it's kind of decentralization theater. And I know that's a bit of a hot take, but it really is. And so that's what's been attracting a lot of people, because they do believe, like a lot of people believe that are in this space, in the core value proposition of decentralized and self-sovereign everything. And so that's what we've been focusing on, and that's what's been attracting people to Quilibrium.
That's awesome. So it sounds like some of the first early use cases have been people seeking resiliency for things that they're building. Is that kind of where you're getting your early takers, or yeah, what are the primary use cases that you see? If you had like a pie chart or a distribution model, where do people fall along that of how they're using or leveraging Quilibrium?
Yeah, so where that falls under is basically like in the crypto space, at least, because we actually have a large cohort of people who are more from Web 2 that are also attracted to Quilibrium for basically the same principles, but just different inciting incidents. But in terms of the Web 3 audience, the primary people who have been attracted to Quilibrium have come in because they either want to host their front end or they want to host their back end on something that isn't Amazon Web Services. Or, and this one's particularly interesting, there's a large number of, and again, I'm sorry if y'all have a stake in some of these protocols or projects. This is going to be probably a lot of hot takes spread throughout this entire conversation. But there are a lot of wallet as a service oriented companies out there. And a lot of them claim to do multi-party computation. A lot of them aren't actually doing it. What they're doing is splitting a key into multiple places and then recombining it in one place to go sign it, and then they discard all that data. That's not real MPC. And in fact, actually, there's also a huge compliance problem too, because the New York Department of Financial Services, for example, is very adept at understanding how all of this works. And they don't think that's MPC either. And they will absolutely, like, once you get large enough, they will start cracking down on you. So there's also a secondary audience in Web3. It's a very silent audience because this is typically a very complicated product and most people don't understand MPC key management. But there's a lot of wallet as a service companies that need to become compliant, and Quilibrium basically provides a, Switzerland for data such that they're able to actually fulfill the separation of key material and never recombine it in one place. So our key management offering is the other very big draw.
I love that. And I think it's awesome that you've chosen to prioritize, privacy, more secure data solutions. I know some people who are very, very passionate about this, who I've been talking to over the years. We also got Catch-Up saying, bring the hot takes. We need contrasting views in the space. It's the way we make progress. Totally, 100%. So my question for you now, Cassandra, is, you've built Quilibrium with very strong privacy features, it sounds like, and I'm curious why that's important to you, and if there's been any recent shifts in privacy or security that makes that more important now than ever.
I mean, I feel like it's been this constant battle. Like, back in the 90s, it was called the crypto wars, where you had like the Clipper chip proposal. Just the other day, it was revealed that Comcast actually offers basically using their more recent wireless routers as a tool to measure whether there's movement in the house based on
Oh,
the
yeah, I've heard of that
reflection
kind of
signal.
stuff. Yeah.
And so like there's so many different like facets. It's very much a multi-sided attack that's coming from like ISPs, coming from government, like for example, the UK suing Apple and trying to bring them into secret court to basically compel them to put a backdoor into their advanced data protection offering. There's just so many different layers that are coming into the fore right now that like it's very much at a point, just like how Bitcoin started this whole thing. One of the things Satoshi said very early on, because people were like, "Hey, WikiLeaks needs donations. Why don't we propose this to WikiLeaks?" And Satoshi was like, "No, do not kick the hornet's nest. We are way too early to do that kind of thing." And it's kind of a Trojan horse for freedom, because when you have Bitcoin in its very nascent stage, it needs to get adoption first. It needs to spread out and grow before actors that will try to suppress it can act on it and stop it. And the same thing with just general security practices on the web. We have to get this kind of out the door and proliferate now, and as quickly as possible, as silently as possible, because otherwise you'll get to a point where, just like
You put a target on your back too,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the bonus round in my life, so I don't mind being a martyr for this, but it's definitely it's a real problem. And so like, the EU has this chat control proposal, which is supposed to basically get the government backdoors, because they're, as every single one of these measures always is, they claim it's to protect children. And the irony, of course, is that it actually puts children at greater risk. So like, those are the kinds of things that we see emerging, and in greater velocity, greater quantity. And it's just something that we have to address as quickly as possible. I feel like the window is closing on actually fighting this.
Absolutely. And I'm loving the information you're sharing today. And towards the end of this, we will sometimes have community members come up and ask questions. And, I've worked with a woman, I don't know if anyone knows Dr. Kelly Page. She formerly worked on ETH Denver. She has a PhD in data science. I'm going to see if we can get her up here towards the end, because I'm sure she would have some really, a lot of questions for you on this. I'm also curious, my next question for you, Cassandra, is what kinds of apps are perfect fits for Quilibrium? And is Quilibrium doing anything to ease the onboarding for Web2 developers into a Web3 platform?
So I have a couple of answers to that. The first is going to be the hot take. So the kind of thing that I've thought about crypto in the ecosystem in general over the past years has grown a bit pessimistic. Like I felt like the crypto ecosystem, its origins in the cypherpunk movement, we've kind of lost our way. It's turned into a lot of gambling and degeneracy. And, that can be fun. That can be its own thing. But like, it's starting to become almost the core of what everybody's doing, instead of like focusing on the value propositions of what crypto can do in the first place. And so it kind of comes back to the brass tacks of what's unique about crypto. What is the thing that crypto does that nothing else has been able to do yet? And I'm reminded of, the late Steve Jobs, which everybody knows. And he was thinking about the way that home computers, like way before home computers were a thing, like before that was a common thing in people's houses. What does that bring out? What is the unique advantage that makes people find value in this? And he ultimately summarized it as, it is the bicycle for the mind. And I love that proposition, because that's something that really distills everything into a very simple essence. And so to me, I was thinking more along the lines of, what is the unique value proposition of crypto? What is crypto to the world? And what it actually comes down to is, you're creating self-sovereign data, you're creating self-sovereign finance. And so in a way, instead of a bicycle for the mind with computers, crypto is the passport for the mind. And we haven't
I love that
opportunity to actually enact that. We've like kind of been so focused on just the spreadsheet application, if you will. And there's so much more you can do with that. And so the way that, we think about how applications can be built and how Quilibrium can host them, our mission is to secure every bit of traffic on the web. And so that means like, in service of that goal, our goal is to get every application on the web on Quilibrium.
I love it. That's absolutely awesome. And Deez, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to throw in here, but Cassandra, if you're open to it, I would love to do a quick, demo, maybe showing like how folks can use this, maybe screen share a bit of the app if you're open to it. But I want to throw it over to Deez if he has anything he wants to add there.
Yeah, no, would love to get into it. And then we do make this into a podcast audio, so we'll narrate a little bit too, if it seems a little weird when you're doing the screen share, just so our folks listening in the cars kind of get a play-by-play.
Yeah, not a problem. Let me, okay, so I have never done a screen share on StreamYard before, so
no worries.
this ends up being a complete disaster. Well, we'll see how it goes. So let me try this real quick.
Well, in the meantime, while you're pulling that up, I just want to shout out, we have over 1,000 viewers right now. No pressure, Cassandra. We have over 1,000 people tuning in now watching. So super grateful, that everyone tunes in week after week. And if you haven't already, hit that share button, retweet the stream out so we can get more folks learning about Quilibrium today. I also want to say we got another comment coming in from Systemic, who's asking a question. What programming language will be used for Web3 developers who want to build on QUIL?
Yeah, so this comes back to our central philosophy. We want to make a platform that everybody can use and adopt. And so the idea of having to create a new concrete programming language for this never felt right. One of the biggest things people struggle with when they enter Web3, for example, especially in the ETH ecosystem, is that if you try and build on Solidity, there's a lot of foot guns, especially with respect to reentrancy bugs or just the weird proxy dispatching issues where you can accidentally, create vulnerabilities based on how the selectors for functions are calculated. And so instead of trying to, create a new language that basically lets people code against this runtime, instead, let's use a language that is widely adopted already and something that already has a huge base of open source code that people can just drop in place and use. And so Quilibrium, our philosophy is that, let's use the most popular programming language that's simple, concrete, easy to adapt to our garbled circuit calculation that allows inputs to be private on input, and go from there. So we actually have basically a subset of Golang. We call it the Q compute language, but really it's basically just Golang without channels and without just a few minor things. So it lets you actually use a wealth of open source software that already exists today. So let me go ahead and pull up one of the examples of what we've built. So like I said, we wanted to build an alternative to Discord, and so we did. This leverages Quilibrium's technology for peer-to-peer encrypted conversations. So it has, the same kind of creature comforts as Discord. It's encrypted, but
love the emojis, the GIFs, the Spider-Man one.
Yes,
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's literally, basically get the same kind of secure communication that Signal enables, but give all the features that Discord has. So you have your communities, we call them spaces, you have direct messaging support, and that's basically how this all comes together. And it's very compelling because from a developer's perspective, you just have to use a few SDKs that do all of the hard cryptography stuff for you, and you can just focus on building your application. And that's the philosophy we've taken the whole way through. It's that Steve Ballmer developers kind of thing. So this is an example application, and it's open source. You can check it out on GitHub. The other thing I'll pull up real quick, and this is another demonstration, but this is actually our this is how we do basically the AWS console equivalent. So this is called Q Console. It lets you build applications in a very familiar way. So we have a S3 compatible API called Q Storage, and it lets you, treat it like a S3 bucket. You can upload files to it, but behind the scenes, it's actually taking that data and storing it on Quilibrium's encrypted hypergraph. But the nice thing about it is it's basically, coming back to the application architecture principles, it allows you to leverage the distributed network for essentially a CDN so that the data is very quickly accessible. But at the same time, the data remains private to you and only you. So unless you make the bucket public, which would, of course, make it easily accessible to anybody and therefore not encrypted, you have all the privacy guarantees of Quilibrium itself, but with a very familiar interface. And so I'm just going to demonstrate this real quick. The sign-in process to create a Q console account, we haven't rolled it out publicly yet, but literally it's everything on Q is very oriented around using passkeys. So to sign up, you literally just create a passkey, enter a username for yourself to identify yourself, and you have an account. That's it. It's like 2 clicks to sign up, and then to create a new bucket. Let's call this BMX example bucket, and I'll create that. And then to upload files, you just literally drag and drop. Now, this is going to be a quick example, so I hope that this just works. It might not, given the time frame, but we'll see.
Very, very familiar process. Pulls up the folder from your desktop, from your Finder, and then you just literally highlighted everything and dropped it right in.
Right. And so like you just drag and drop it in, and it creates a new endpoint for you. You can click public bucket, and it'll turn it into a public bucket. And you can see an example here where we have our Q documentation that we've uploaded, and I've already turned on the public bucket, and you can literally just go to that bucket name. And so let's go ahead and, I have to manually type it. Dang it. I wish I hadn't done that. Okay, so.
No, it's all good. We won't narrate that part because our listeners won't. It's still super easy.
Right. The thing is that I have autocomplete, and there's a few things that I don't want to reveal yet in terms of domain.
We can't spill all the alpha beans here today, you guys.
Yes. Okay. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then boom, you have your website. And so now you have entire Q infrastructure powering your website with a very simple upload. And our pricing is basically ultra competitive. So you can see some of the data around that on our website. We have, like lots of friendly information about it. But when you get to, we just launched our rebranded site, so I'm having to remember where we put things.
Well, I just want to say it looks really good. I am a sucker for those interactive websites that look really cool. Yeah, like just very makes you want to hang out and look at things a bit more.
How did I hear some? Oh, there it is. Okay. So you can see the pricing. We have a cost calculator, so you can compare what the price is for doing something on Q versus doing something on AWS. So you can see like the Q price is much lower than AWS's equivalent, especially when you get to certain things like QKMS. So one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of managed wallets out there, is like managed wallet services, is because it's hard to do it right. And if you want to use something like Amazon Web Services through their KMS offering to manage your keys, they cost $1 a key per month, which when you're talking about millions of users, that's an insane cost. And so Q brings down the cost significantly. We don't charge at all for the number of keys that you have. We just go based on API calls because that's actual compute traffic that we service. And so like we're talking about on the terms of like 100 to 1,000 times savings over Amazon Web Services. So like there's lots of.
Wow, that's huge.
To
that part right there, like seriously, I don't know if you guys missed that, but that is massive.
Yeah, and we have the estimates here. You can look at your request. Nice, easy sliders, storage, API calls, keys, all the way up, and you just slid it all the way over, and it just shows, yeah, you're saving 98.8% if you're maxing out your keys. So very competitive.
Very similarly for AWS S3, like you'll have slight differences for data storage. We have a very generous like 5 GB free tier for people who are just starting to build their websites or just have really small websites. And the biggest thing that you can basically consider to be a massive saving compared to Amazon. Amazon's notorious for this, but then you also have some like Vercel out there where it's even worse. The egress fees will just eat you alive, and this is like dramatically amortized on Q. You avoid a lot of those fees. That's basically it.
Awesome. We got some comments coming in from Ketchup, Nico saying wag me QUIL. Yeah, just to dive deeper into the agenda here. Okay, so we're through the demo. I'm curious about milestones and roadmap. Cassandra, you said you've been doing this for about 2 years. I'm curious, like, what previous milestones or accomplishments that you're most proud of for the project, and if there's anything coming up on your roadmap that you'd like to share.
Oh yes. So it's funny that you just like you mentioned at the beginning of the stream that you just got back from NFT NYC.
Yeah, were you there too?
I wasn't there, but Q actually has an interesting history with NFT NYC.
Oh wow, okay.
2 years ago, when we were basically like really kicking off this project, one of the things that we needed in order to actually make this protocol secure is we had to do what is called a trusted setup ceremony. And the name makes it sound like it's something only a few people are doing, but what you actually want, just like, did you participate in Ethereum's summoning ceremony, KZG ceremony, all the different names they came up with it?
No, I didn't.
So before they launched the blobs feature, they needed to do what is called a trusted setup ceremony. And what that basically means is you have as many people as you can possibly get, like as many people, as many platforms, as many weird ways as possible all over the world.
Just trying it.
To contribute random data in order to produce what is called a secure reference string. And when they did that, they had a website where you could do it through your browser. They had console apps where you could do it on your command line and all that. And the goal is that as long as just one person is participating honestly, the entire ceremony setup is secure. So you want to get as many people to do it as possible because it's, practically once you scale out to, thousands of people doing it or hundreds of thousands of people doing it, it's pretty reasonable to believe that there has not been all of them as bad actors. And so we needed to do the same thing. We couldn't use Ethereum's trusted setup ceremony because one, we were actually doing it at the same time they were doing theirs. And two, we have a different cryptographic implementation. We use a different elliptic curve than they do and so on. And so I wanted to do a couple things different than what they did. One, I wanted to flex because they had people had asked, like, why can't I do this from my phone? And they were like, there's no reasonable way to do it on a browser, on a phone. And I was like, that's not true. So I made the ceremony, I called it the Declaration of Internet Independence. And people could just like tap in and either on their phone, on their laptop. And I also created a command line tool so people could participate. And by doing so, you're helping secure the network. And you'd get like a voucher for 50 QUIL at the end. And so I figured the best way to get a massive audience participating is one, of course, enable it by phone, but two, broadcast it as wide as possible. So 2 years ago, NFT NYC, I took up the deal from, trying to remember the name of the company. I think at the time it was called Blindspot, but they've changed their name. And I took out an ad in Times Square and an ad over on the signage near NFT NYC with two things. It had the phrase, "The internet is dead, long live the internet," and then just a QR code. That's it. And like, it was meant to be like something kind of like guerrilla advertising and enticing to people to just like see what the heck this is about. And when you scanned it, you'd go to the Q page and you'd be able to participate in the ceremony. And it worked. At the time, like, we jumped past Ethereum's participants in their ceremony. They ran theirs a lot longer, so they ended up concluding with about like 10 or 20,000 more participants than we had. But at the end, we had over 200,000 unique contributions to the setup ceremony, and that was fantastic. That was very helpful. So that was the big first milestone, and it was launched at NFT NYC, which is I think just fun serendipitous coincidence. Then the next stage was our actual like initial network launch, trying to prove out, basically it was an incentivized testnet. And we did this for a pretty decent period of time because obviously we're doing a lot of novel stuff and there's a lot of things that, because no one else has done it before, things can go wrong. And so we were basically, repairing the airplane as it's flying in the air to get ourselves into a state where we're like ready to fully launch all the different aspects of the protocol that we need. And so last year, we got to the point where the network was fully operable and was able to process transactions. Kind of like the first year of Ethereum or so, like the amount of gas that was allowed to be used for transactions basically meant that the only thing you could do on Ethereum was actually just like send ETH. You couldn't do smart contracts really at that point. And then now we're coming to the point where the full application architecture is permissionless and available. And there's a lot of people who are watching this broadcast right now who are desperately waiting for me to give a date on that, which I very specifically said we're not going to communicate any ETAs, but realistically, it's going to be happening over this week. And so that's the next big milestone that we're looking forward to, is just the complete general application availability.
That's exciting. So with those two examples of, I mean, we're going after the Amazon web stack, and of course people wanting to coordinate with a very familiar Discord UI. Personally, which industry do you want to see, maybe disrupted isn't the right word, but people who know the industry well to deploy on QUIL and start proliferating, sovereignty through their services?
Yeah. So one thing I could mention real quick, because this is kind of a like fun circumstance. I used to have a pretty decent presence on Twitter. I stopped using it because honestly, like crypto Twitter generally has gotten pretty rough. And so I'm largely on Farcaster now, but at the time I was posting what I was building around what is now called Quorum, that Discord clone, and the components that basically made this all work. And there were a few founders in the social media space that were slightly crypto adjacent. And they reached out to me because they had mentioned, hey, we have this problem. Like Amazon's threatened to pull the plug on us because we value freedom of speech. We value people being able to speak their minds and have control over what they're saying, not have like some centralized arbiter saying what's acceptable discourse or not. And I personally am like a very huge advocate for freedom of speech. Like I find that, it is far better to shine a light on things that are toxic and broken rather than just try and suppress it. Because what you end up have happening is when you try to suppress it, it just gets more concentrated into darker corners and becomes more radicalized. And so they felt the same way. And so they were very interested in moving what they were using to host their application, like the way that they had their database set up, the way that they had their backend set up. They wanted to move to Q. And that was one of the first like major disruptions that we basically realized, oh, wow, that's actually the inciting incident for us that led us to turn this into a protocol instead of just be a Discord alternative.
I love it. I love it. And before I forget, so say a listener's listening in and they have a realization, right? Like, oh, maybe I should worry about sovereignty. Maybe I should take some steps. Just from a macro point of view, what kind of advice, if you had 1 to 5 steps, if someone came in and says, I want to secure my sovereignty, do you have like a baby step guide? For example, if we're getting someone into crypto, we're like, hey, get a hardware wallet, make sure you have password managers, basic things like that. But do you have a kind of a self-sovereign guide with QUIL in mind?
Our perspective is that, like, if you're not making it as intuitive as how people currently use the existing software, then it's not good enough. Because when it comes down to it, and you actually like think about how consumers interact with technology, generally, like Apple, for example, Apple is generally is a very pro-consumer, easy to use interface with all of their products. And the value add of privacy is a feature. They don't generally people aren't picking up Apple products because they preserve your privacy. Instead, they pick up Apple products because they're easy to use. The privacy is just a bonus. And so that's the same perspective we take. Like, we want to make it possible so that you don't have to actually think about how to properly secure things. Because if you have to keep that in mind, if you have to worry about those kinds of foot guns, 90% of the users are going to screw up something. It's the reason why people get wrecked now. Like this was kind of, again, hot takes. This is why I was very opposed to the EIP. I forget the number, but the one that basically let people sign away complete privileges over their wallet to a smart contract for a temporary interaction, because none of the wallets were ready to really support this or display this correctly to users. And a lot of users will just blindly accept something. And so, I don't remember when I last checked. I think it was like a couple weeks ago, but like 90% of the contract calls that were like setting these up to transfer those permissions were all wallet drainers. And so like that's kind of the thing, is like if you are like basically not doing the most intuitive thing possible, and privacy is just the feature of it, it's not going to work.
I love it. Long live the internet. I'm seeing come in the hashtag. Build the foundation, not from the top down, from the bottom up.
Mr. Frank Q, we got Nico. Yeah, I got a lot of questions and comments coming through. I do want to make sure we get through everything on the agenda here, and I am curious if we can kind of give an overview. I mean, we're talking about features now, but Cassandra, if you can share some use cases and maybe give a step-by-step guide on how people can get started with building on Quilibrium and maybe even running a node.
Sure. So building on Quilibrium, like we have, as I mentioned before, with a Q console interface, like the goal is to make it as simple as possible. In fact, like our S3 compatible API, you basically just like sign up for an account, get things registered there, generate your API keys, and you can literally just migrate by switching your endpoint and API keys. For things that are a bit more involved, like if you want to launch an application on Q, we have a developer guide on our docs.quilibrium.com. It gives you basically all the information you need to know, both for developing and running a node. And similarly, for running a node, our goal was to try to make this as easy as possible. It's gotten a little bit more complicated the more the network has grown in functionality, just because of the way that we've had to implement it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to service. So, but we have tried very hard to like basically make setup scripts, auto upgrading scripts, and as best as we can for people who want to run a node, we try to make it very easy for you to do so.
I love that. I think, something I've heard Jesse say is, we got to make everything easier, and then we got to make it 10 times easier again. One of my favorite quotes from Jesse is, if it's not as easy as pressing a button to order DoorDash or order an Uber, people are not going to go out of their way to eat friction for breakfast, right? Like, we got to make things as easy as possible for people to actually come on chain. So I love that you're doing that, Cassandra. And I'm curious, I do want to pass back to Dees in a second, but Cassandra, if you have any calls to action for the community, for our listeners, for our viewers today, what would be your calls to action?
Calls to action, I guess I would say, like, if you want to run a node, run a node. If you can run a node, run a node. If you fear that, even just the slightest bit, that there is a risk that things could change for your own personal situation, like, now is the time to take steps on your own personal sovereignty.
And why should someone run a node, Cassandra?
Running a node, well, obviously, as any crypto protocol, there are rewards for running a node. But the other thing that's important about it is that it basically gives you access to the Q network in a way that you have greater control. Like, you have control over what data that you're replicating. You have obviously faster access to it since it's on your own local node. And it gives you the ability to more like directly interact with the network. Like, when we have these polished offerings like Q console, it's a different thing that, there's many layers of user friendliness, but there's also, of course, because this is a managed service, there are fees both either in fiat or in native QUIL. But if you build it natively, then of course you can just use the native QUIL token, and it saves you a bit.
Awesome. Well, Dees, I'm not sure. Do you have any questions or anything you want to chime in here with?
No, not specifically. I kind of just want to open the floor. Like, Cassandra, you have the mic. You have a captive audience, which is a very valuable thing nowadays, especially with our we're happy about these distribution channels. So if someone were in the car, anything else you'd like to tell someone who's just learning about this, who wants to get their feet wet, dip their toes in?
Yeah. Like I said, the documentation page at docs.quilibrium.com is going to be the most helpful resource. the way that we've updated the main website is to like focus on different audiences based on where they're coming from, whether you're a user, whether you're a builder, whether you're somebody who's more interested in just the crypto side of things. Like it's got different entry points based on what you need.
Why is Beethoven American? Yeah, and Jimmy the Lad also asked, what is a node? And I'd also like Beethoven to weigh in on this. Specifically, they're requesting some Beethoven insights.
No comment on that. I need to do some research in the background. I can't fall over myself here.
And I have another question coming in from Systemic, who said, what are the technical requirements for running a node? By the way, I just want to say, I think this is the most questions we've ever gotten in the comments section on the live stream. So definitely a lot of people very interested in this, Cassandra. And we have been inching closer to 2,000 listeners here. So we're getting there.
Nice. Yeah, so the technical requirements for running a node, again, this network is a distributed network like any other, but the difference that really distinguishes Q from the majority of crypto networks is that it's a sharded network. So there are basically, like, if you have a quad core processor with 8 gigs of RAM and like 16 gigs of drive space, you can run a node. But if you have like a 512 core processor, you can also run a node. And the difference is that the node will auto scale based on what resources your machine is able to provide. So in terms of minimum resources, like it would basically be like a quad core processor, 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of storage space. Anything more just enables what more of the network you're able to cover.
Got it. And another question from Jimmy the Lad is this for individuals at home for running nodes?
Yeah. So there are people who have their have nodes that they run at home. There are people who run nodes in data centers. The one thing I would specifically call out though is that this is not like this isn't like proof of stake oriented networks where you can chuck a box into a virtual box at least into AWS. Don't use AWS. The billing will kill you.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting point. And I see there's a lot of questions coming in. Jimmy asking, is there any ROI for doing this? He says he feels like he'd just be burning through electricity and core cycles and kind of wants to understand, like, how does this benefit someone to do?
Yeah, so one of the innovations behind Quilibrium, and you can see it in the white paper. We also have a lot of documentation and explainers about this. There's loads of previous streams I've done where I've talked about the details of this, but basically Quilibrium is in the family of proof of work networks. And so what our particular consensus algorithm and reward mechanism stems from is called proof of meaningful work. And so by participating in the network, you are being rewarded relative to the scale at which you've provided work for the network in terms of the network native QUIL token.
I love that. Proof of meaningful work. That's really cool. Deez, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to add here.
Yeah, now I'm on, Facebook Marketplace looking for old laptops that I can start plugging in.
Oh, yeah, there's a long-running meme about people running a farm of Mac Minis.
Wow.
Love it.
Jimmy is saying, so crypto mining stuff.
Yes. I don't like the term mining. I never really did. But I've kind of always had like differing views from the general like crypto consensus on how things get named. I always thought it was cool that Satoshi had called Bitcoin's core data structure originally the time chain, not a blockchain, and that never took off. Blockchain won.
Wow. Okay, so we're getting a lot more coming in. The name of the coin is QUIL, you guys. The name of the token is QUIL. Got someone asking that.
I can ask cheers, Beethoven. That's hilarious. I can ask a brief one. So if, say, a DeFi protocol wanted to run a subset of their services on QUIL, how would they go about that?
Sure, I will answer that. But I do want to mention real quick, because we have had a certain problem with this. The QUIL token is a network native token. We do have a wrapped version of the QUIL token on Ethereum. If you see a token called QUIL on another network like Solana or Base, it's a scam. It's not us. Just wanting to clarify real quick, because I've seen people get burned by that. So yeah, to if somebody wanted to run DeFi protocol on Quilibrium, for example, there's a couple of different routes you can take. You can either leverage the network's native execution architecture, so basically like use garbled circuits, basically have a private set intersection calculation for trade matching, or you could potentially leverage an existing network, like you could plug in an L1 or an L2 and basically roll up the state to Q. We have what is called a basically like a tenderable token that you can configure that lets you set up an app shard relative like fee basis that is not directly attached to the network. It just benefits from the core consensus. And so like there's basically a couple of different places you can plug in an application, whether you're really in the EVM ecosystem and don't want to leave, or if you're on Q and you want to be Q native and you want everything to run on Q, then you can basically just build the garbled circuits necessary to perform DeFi applications.
Awesome.
Yeah, so lastly, I want to say I did invite some folks up to ask questions. I'm not sure if we have anyone in the back room right now. But yeah, if anybody has any, final questions they want to share, we're paying attention to the comments section. If anyone has any closing thoughts or comments or questions for Cassandra. Now, for you, Cassandra, I am curious, if you have any final words of wisdom or, any resources for folks to get involved or learn more that you want to share.
Sure. We have a couple of different links to community resources if you want to participate, just either in terms of idea generation, proposals for the network. Our repositories are obviously open sourced. So you can find all of those resources on quilibrium.com. That is QUILIBRIUM. There are people who have already tried to typo squat domains, and that has been a thing for us.
Got it. And I see a bunch more questions coming in. So, Jimmy, Cassandra actually, he's asking about what your background is and why you're in this. So, Jimmy, if you watch the stream back, Cassandra did talk about her background coming from Coinbase, working on Quilibrium for 2 years. So you can watch that back. But yeah, I am also curious. I like to ask people what their why is. Like, what makes you so passionate about this? I feel like I kind of have like an idea based on everything you've been sharing, but I am curious if you have like a specific why for what you're doing.
Yeah, so I've previously described it as the internet being under a multi-sided attack from different sources, but realistically, even before I was in crypto specifically, I've worked for industries like telecoms, and I was very familiar with how the government basically erodes your privacy. Like, for example, in the United States, internet service providers, or more specifically like telecoms with respect to landlines, there is a requirement under a law called CALEA that you are supposed to make phone lines tappable by the FBI, of course, with a relevant court order or whatever, but you have to make them tappable. And this is something that, is very insidious because there's been this kind of incestuous fusion between the very few telephone providers there are and the nation state apparatus. Like you can, find that, was it like 641B, like room 641B was the AT&T room where all traffic data was basically split into a room that the NSA ran to do analytics on all the traffic going through that particular center.
Wow.
And so I got to become witness to just the very disgusting surveillance apparatus and this fusion of the people or services that we need to trust. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. It angers me every day. And every single day, there's more and more legislation, more and more actions being taken that are trying to essentially close the door on people taking back their privacy. And so for me, I feel like this is a silent war that not everybody's even aware is happening. And it is essentially my life's mission to fight that war and win it.
Wow, I love it. Well, your passion is just so evident through everything you're doing at Quilibrium, and you're just extremely knowledgeable. Been in the trenches since you said 2008. You've been around, so I think you just have a wealth of knowledge. And I'm very grateful that we have folks like yourself fighting this fight behind the scenes. And I am curious. This isn't on my agenda today, but what are the best practices for people that want to be online but reduce the amount that they're being spied on, or giving up their privacy and giving up their data?
I mean, one of the easiest things that people often miss is installing an ad blocker, using a more secure browser. For the love of God, don't use Chrome unless like you really have to. Like I'm
You
using
like Brave?
No,
Really?
I just
Okay.
click on Chromium, and so it's still like it's not doing the monitoring and analytics that Google Chrome proper does. But one of the problems of using a platform that is embracing the underlying, implementation of the browser engine is you end up in this state where basically one entity is controlling the standards of how web applications can be built. So like on a Mac, for example, I use Safari or Firefox to avoid, getting too much, like every single time you visit a website, you could potentially provide analytics that say what your browser is from the user agent string. And the more and more that number starts to turn into, it's basically Chrome, whether it's Edge, Brave, or Chrome itself, the more and more people will continue to build and only target Chrome instead of making your web app work across multiple browsers. So yeah, ad blockers, script blockers. If you need to be especially concerned about privacy, I would recommend Tor browser. Tor has its own issues, so do take caution of why you're using Tor. But basically, like there are easy steps that people can do to be proactive. The other thing is I have lockdown mode set in place on both my Mac and my phone. It is a little bit annoying at times because you lose some of the features, but it dramatically reduces the attack surface from which you can be compromised. There are a lot of companies out there that have, like NSO Group, for example, has that zero-click exploit where they can send you a message your phone won't even show you, and then it has compromised your phone silently in the background. But lockdown mode restricts a lot of the underlying things that they use to take advantage and exploit.
Wow. Well, I just typed some things in to come back to later. And you said, what is your favorite browser to use? Would that be Tor? Would you say it has the most privacy features built in?
Tor browser does have great privacy features built in. It basically reduces the number of mistakes people make when they're configuring their computer to use Tor as a proxy. So if you do have that kind of concern and you're not too worried about your own nation, at least if you're in the US, if you're not worried about the US spying on you, Tor browser is great. But in general, like if you just want a better browser that avoids a lot of the potential problems from just, constantly surveilling everything you're doing, I prefer Safari.
Okay, got it. Well, thank you for sharing all the best practices here today. I do want to encourage everyone who's watching, if you're not following Quilibrium already, the handle is at Quilibrium Inc. on X, and you're also on Farcaster, you said, right, Cassandra?
Yeah, I'm actually more on Farcaster than I probably will ever be again on Twitter.
Can you just share your handle and the handle for your project on Farcaster as well?
Sure. It's at Cassie on Farcaster and at Quilibrium on Farcaster.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Dees, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to chime in here with.
Yeah, no, I just think it's super important work, and it's been such a pleasure chatting, and love the conviction and mission. I think as LMMs, get even more powerful, the bad actors are probably going to leverage those more than the good actors, and it's really going to make this very apparent. It's like, how are they getting this data so quickly, and how are we being targeted? So the tools to exploit these cracks in the system, I think, are getting worse, and so I think what QUIL is doing is a phenomenal foundation that hopefully, the demand, well, it'll be unfortunate, right? The demand will rise with the need, but you being there, providing the need and working on these types of things to defend against that. Thank you from all the cyberpunks out there and building the better future. And I will adopt the hashtag long live the internet now. I
yeah. And Beethoven. Okay. I think we got a new name for you, Beethoven. Beethoven.
I will keep them coming. Love it.
And I love the Quilibrium, term. We got LFQ out there. We got QM. I love it.
Yeah, we have
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we have a very energetic community. I love them to bits.
I can see that. I mean, I think we might have a record here. We're gonna have to go back and see, but this feels like the most comments we've ever gotten on a live stream. We're also connected to X, Farcaster, Twitch, YouTube. So we also got comments coming in from all these different platforms. So very excited to see the just the energy in the community today around this. And let's see. We're close to 2K listeners, but we are over the hour. So yeah, I'll just go around the room. Dees, if you want to share anything coming up for BMX. I know we have Carousel you mentioned at the beginning, but any housekeeping you want to do on the BMX side, feel free.
Yeah, no, just thanks for everyone tuning in, and yeah, Carousel launched, so love people's feedback. It's V1, so we're going to be improving it consistently. But yeah, just keep following and supporting, and we're gearing up for Daily Swap. And then yeah, it was great to have Veil Cash on last week, and then Cassandra this week. We're really dialing into privacy and sovereignty, and I'm sure it's not a coincidence that we're looking into these areas, because we definitely want to build towards a future where DeFi is for everyone, right? And everyone can access yields and movement of money and things that raise everyone up. So without fear of persecution. So thanks so much for your time. And yeah, that's all from my end.
Yeah, and Cassie, I mean, I haven't mentioned this, but I can definitely relate to your founder's journey, leaving your full-time job to work on your own thing. I actually took that plunge several months ago, starting Onchain Media and working on my media business. So I would love to talk to you more at length and, explore ways that I can continue supporting you, Quilibrium, because I really love what you're working on. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. And before we go, one thing on the carousel side, I would love to preview really quick before we jump off is from our creative side on BMX, we actually have a new short video that was released. If we can bring that screen up. And yeah, this just came out so cool, you guys. For those of you that are, following along on the BMX account, we have a lot of, different creative work and videos going out always. So I'm super, super bullish on this one. I think it came out really good. And yeah, you guys can see the announcement on the BMX DeFi account. If you're not following at BMX DeFi, go ahead and give a follow. And yeah, let's ride again every week on Tuesday. We will be here. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Almost 2,000 viewers today. And for everyone that is listening to the podcast, thank you for our listeners. Thank you to our viewers. And we will see you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Cassandra. Your time's so valuable. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.